Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and have you ever noticed that the Fast and the Furious from 2001, the original that started the franchise, is almost a complete beat-for-beat ripoff of 1991's Point Break, directed by Kathryn Bigelow? Well, I'm going to explain to you guys today the key similarities and the key differences, and why only one of those actually started one of the biggest franchises of all time, and while the other one actually just ended up with one of the worst remakes of all time. So we have to start back in the beginning in 1991 with Kathryn Bigelow's Point Break.
Rock and roll.
27 banks in 3 years.
This came out 1 week after Terminator 2. Kathryn Bigelow at the time was actually married to James Cameron. James Cameron actually has a credit for Point Break. Apparently, he also came up with the ex-president's bank robbery gimmick, you know, wearing the mask and everything. Apparently, all that can be credited to James Cameron. And it must have been a great couple of weeks in the Cameron household back then. You had Terminator 2 just riding high on top of the world. And then the following week, Terminator 2 was still #1 at the box office, but Point Break came in at #2. And Point Break is one of my favorite action films of all time. It stars Keanu Reeves as Johnny Utah. He's a young hotshot, used to be a quarterback for Ohio State. Unfortunately, he ended up with a real bad injury, and he decides, you know what, I'm going to get into law. And he becomes an FBI agent, and his first big case working with Gary Busey, and he's got this awful boss in John C. McKinley, but you know what, he's going undercover. He's going to try and figure out who the ex-presidents are. They've been robbing banks all over LA, and he's going to go undercover because Gary Busey has a theory that these people are surfers.
The ex-presidents rip off banks to finance their endless summer.
So he has to go undercover as a surfer and try and figure out which one of these gangs is doing it. And this leads him right to Bodhi, played by Patrick Swayze, and probably my favorite Patrick Swayze role. But he's not sure if this is the guy doing it. In fact, he doesn't believe this is the guy at all. He believes it's another gang that involves Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He thinks that these guys are just surfers. He kind of gets it in with Lori Petty, who used to actually date Bodhi.
He's a modern savage, the real searcher.
What's he searching for?
The ride.
And this is where our first similarity actually comes in, because if you look at 2001's The Fast and the Furious, that movie starts off a little bit different. We don't realize Brian, who's played by Paul Walker, is actually a cop at the beginning of this movie. This is the real big key difference when we start out Point Break and The Fast and the Furious is, at the beginning of The Fast and Furious, we just start with a street race. We think that Brian's just a regular old-fashioned street racer, not that great at it yet, but he already knows how to street race, so we just assume that he's already into this lifestyle. Whereas in Point Break, you know, Keanu Reeves has never surfed before, so he's got to learn. He is brand new.
Hey man, a lot of guys your age are learning to surf. It's cool. There's nothing wrong with it.
I'm 25.
He's not being accepted into the culture. That's the big thing. That's why Lori Petty is pushing him away at the beginning of that movie.
What do you want?
Shrimp and fries?
I mean, what do you want? Why do you keep hanging around here?
Whereas in this movie, you know, he loses the race. It's no big deal. But it's revealed to us, you know what? He is an undercover cop. He's trying to figure out who's committing these robberies all over town. They're stealing DVD players and VCRs, so all that stuff is just worth absolutely nothing now. I'm glad they support physical media, but, you know, you shouldn't be stealing it. Every single day, Brian, who is undercover, he likes to stop at this restaurant, owned by Vin Diesel's character of Dom. His sister's actually running the counter at this restaurant, played by Jordana Brewster. He comes in there every day, orders an awful tuna sandwich, and this is it. This is when we first notice the similarities. Not only are they both undercover cops, yes, they start out in different points, but they're both undercover cops. Every single day they go to the same restaurant, whether it be on the pier where Keanu Reeves goes and sees Lori Petty, or whether it be just at this regular like lunch restaurant that's kind of also on the beach, but not quite on the beach, but he stops in there every day and he orders the same thing. Both women are trying to tell the lead characters, whether it be Brian or Johnny Utah, that, you know what, you're not gonna make it, stop coming in here, but you know, they're persistent, they're gonna get in, mainly because they're trying to build this case. But of course, you know, they start to get attracted to these women very similarly. Keanu Reeves is starting to fall for Lori Petty, but, you know, unfortunately, she used to date Bodhi. Whereas Jordana Brewster, you know, she's Vin Diesel's sister, so that also creates an issue. And Vin Diesel and Bodhi are both a little bit hesitant towards these guys. The big difference between Dom and Bodhi is that, you know, Bodhi's a little bit more warmer, you know, whereas Vin Diesel, he's very angry.
Don't come around here again.
Hey man, you know this is bullshit.
You work for Harry, right?
Yeah, I just started.
You were just fired.
He tells Brian basically just to get out of here and never come back. But these restaurants, they're pretty much lit the exact same way. We kind of hit these plot points almost at the same point in the film. And once we find out that Brian is an undercover cop, it's almost playing out the exact same way. We just don't check in as much with the cops in this movie as we do in Point Break. Point Break, it does also feel like Keanu Reeves has this great partnership with Gary Busey.
Utah!
Give me 2.
where we get to spend a lot more time with the FBI, whereas in the Fast and the Furious, we're spending most of our time with the street racers and their gang. But we also have a scene in both movies where we get to see the friends of Bodhi or Dom. In the Fast and Furious, it's a house party, whereas in Point Break, it's a football game on the beach one night. Although there is a house party in Point Break, we get to build up the friendship, we get to understand why the characters all of a sudden start falling into these lifestyles despite having a commitment to their jobs. Very important jobs, being police officers or FBI agents, they have a job to do, but they just fall into this lifestyle. They found something that they never knew that they wanted.
Those dead souls inching along the freeways in their metal coffins, we show them that the human spirit is still alive.
Lose 10 seconds or less. I'm free.
Whether it be Johnny Utah finding out that he loves to surf, or Brian O'Connor finding out that he just loves to drive cars. He's a big car guy, but they didn't uncover this until they ended up taking these jobs. And that creates confliction with them, because whether it be Brian caring about Dom or Johnny Utah caring about Bodhi, both of them feel conflicted now. They're being pulled in 2 different directions. That's the one issue with being an undercover cop. You gotta be committed to your job. You cannot fall into the lifestyle. But both of these are young cops. They don't really know the lifestyle yet, and they found something that was missing in their entire life, whether it be street racing or surfing. Both films even feature a scene where Brian has to infiltrate one house. You know, he kind of wears a mask over his face, the SWAT mask, so that you don't know it's him, so he can remain undercover. Whereas Keanu Reeves, he shows up late to the raid where they're actually infiltrating a gang who they think are the ex-presidents. That's the gang that includes Anthony Kiedis. And these scenes are like both right in the middle of the movies to let us know that they're still cops, but we could just see that they don't have the commitment to being a cop anymore. They really want to go back to doing what they enjoy doing, whether it be street racing or surfing. But we put these scenes in here to let us know they still have a job to do. They can't just be messing around out there. They have to meet deadlines. And that's because both Paul Walker and Keanu Reeves don't want to admit to themselves, even though they both know deep down that it's Vin Diesel and the boys stealing all the stuff, and it's Bodhi and the boys robbing all the banks. But they don't want to admit it to themselves.
It's Toretto, Brian. It always has been Toretto.
So both films do these raids on the house on people that they think might be the ones actually committing the crimes, but it turns out, obviously, they are not the ones doing it. They're both terrible criminals, but they're not the ones committing the crimes that they're looking for. They're not the ones robbing the trucks, and they're not the ones robbing the banks. So both Brian and Johnny's bosses lay it out to them: solve the crime now. We have no time to wait. You have to do it. And this creates even more of a conflict. And eventually, in the third act of both of these movies, whether it be Bodhi or whether it be Dom.
A lawyer! You lied to me!
Yeah, this is Officer Brian O'Connor. I'm off duty MAPD.
They figure out who the real person is. They both realize that this guy is a cop. You know, Bodhi figures it out a little bit more for himself because of the one big chase scene that we have on foot, whereas Dom, it's a little bit more of a surprise because Brian picks up the phone and calls his office to get an ambulance, and, you know, that's it. Dom knows. But, you know, again, he doesn't, like, just kill him right there. He's conflicted, too. Both of these guys, both Bodhi and Dom, are also conflicted now. Like, I care about this guy. They have real friends now in both films, and they're not just gonna kill him. I think that Bodhi's a little bit more ruthless and vindictive than Vin Diesel is in his film, but either way, they're both really, really, really pissed off. And this is what leads us up to the third act. You know, we got to finally close everything out. Are they going to arrest these guys? Are they going to let them go? And both films end with a very, very similar sequence. Bodhi got away. No one's heard from him in a very long time. But Keanu Reeves has a hunch. He's been talking about this wave that he absolutely has to ride. So he's like, okay, I know where he is. He gets there. And then if you switch back to the Fast and the Furious, we get Dom and Brian meeting up at a red light, one last drag race, and they're about to go. And in Point Break, Keanu Reeves says, you know what, fine, go out there, you're gonna die anyway. Even though he's got the cops there to finally arrest him, he lets him go. He realizes he's gonna pretty much die in these waves anyway.
Let him go! No, I didn't.
But of course, that means he's turning his back on the FBI, and he can't be a cop anymore. That's why he throws the badge away. Where at the end of the Fast and Furious, they have this drag race, but of course, Dom in that Charger that's still going after Fast X somehow. And he's injured. That's it. The car's not going to go. He's going to get arrested. But Brian, you know what? He gives him the keys to his car because he still owes him a car. And he says, get out of here. And that's it. Brian turns his back on being a police officer as well. Both of these films end with these characters walking away. So they hit almost all the same plot points in both films. It's not a shot-for-shot remake or anything like that, but we hit the same story beats in both films. They both end the same way. The only thing with the Fast and the Furious is many people probably don't remember the Fast and the Furious from 2001 because the franchise really didn't take off. off until we got to Fast 5. You know, after this movie, we ended up with Too Fast, Too Furious, Tokyo Drift, Fast and Furious. You know, all those movies did pretty good, but it wasn't until Fast 5 that the Fast franchise became an absolute juggernaut at the box office. Whereas Point Break came and went in 1991, it became one of my favorite action films and a lot of other people's favorite action films, but we never got a sequel or anything like that. The best we got was an awful remake, so Point Break might not be as remembered as a lot of people think. And the Fast and the Furious, the original one, many people probably don't really remember what the original one was about, other than the memes that always are floating around there talking about, in the first Fast and the Furious, this is how long it's been around. They were stealing DVD players, VCRs, and just, you know, little small 13-inch TVs that I had in my bedroom when I was a kid. And, you know, they might not remember that the original Fast and the Furious was really about the street racing, but the film itself, the way it was written, pretty much took a lot from Point Break, whether they intended to or not. It kind of does feel like they intended to, and they really should thank the original Point Break for hitting a lot of those story beats that the Fast and Furious would eventually hit. I'm not knocking the Fast and the Furious. I actually still think that the original Fast and Furious is the best in the entire franchise. Fast 5 is growing on me. You know, I appreciate those films for what they are, but nothing compares to the cheesy 90s fest that is Point Break. That is one of my favorite action films of all time, and maybe that's the reason why I enjoy the Fast and the Furious so much. I really do appreciate the plot and the story of the original Fast and Furious, even if I do truly believe that is a complete ripoff of 1991's Point Break. I just still think that Point Break is overall a better movie, and I think a lot of that has to be credited also to the actors. As much as I love Paul Walker and Vin Diesel and everybody supporting them, in Point Break we get Keanu Reeves, Gary Busey, John C. McKinley, Lori Petty, just a murderer's row of actors. Even though I do appreciate that early 2000s tone as well, it really does make me feel nostalgic. I just still feel like Point Break is overall the better film. But guys, it's also Friday. That means it's our digital code giveaway. In every single video we do here on the channel on Friday, I'm going to ask you guys 2 digital code giveaway questions. All you have to do is answer one in the comment section below, and as long as you do that, you come back to Monday's video, I put your name on a magic wheel, we spin that bad boy 2 times. The 2 names it lands on, they have their choice of the digital codes that you've seen on your screen before you today. And you know what? I wanted to ask you guys, what film do you prefer, Point Break or The Fast and the Furious from 2001? And if you haven't seen any of those films, this is where the second question is going to come in. I want to know from you, from 1990 to 2010, what was your favorite action film to come out in that time period? Leave those answers in the comment section below, and as long as you do that, don't forget to come back to Monday's video where we'll put your name on a magic wheel and we'll spin that bad boy 2 times. All you got to do is answer one of those questions, so don't feel obligated to answer them both. So if you've never seen Point Break or The Fast and the Furious, don't worry about it. We just want you to answer one of those questions, and we'll put your name on that magic wheel. And if you guys enjoyed this video, and you want to continue to support Let's Talk, the best way to do that is just by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, telling your friends about us, turning notifications on, sharing the video, or you can even become a channel member. We have 3 tiers for that. You can look for all the perks in the description below. We have our Friends of the Channel tier. We have a Producers tier. That's where you're going to find John Doe Juggalo, Jason Martin, and Mr. Smelly Potato. We also have a Directors tier. That's where you're going to find Frank's Media and Reviews. Frank has a great YouTube channel as well. You saw our collaboration. I hope you guys enjoyed that. We're going to be doing more of those going forward, so make sure you guys give him a follow. And then after you're done doing all of that, if you have no money to throw our way, don't worry about that. We just appreciate you watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, get out in those streets and tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.